I was 9 years old the first time I understood what it meant to be invisible in your own home. My father was standing at the kitchen counter, reading something on his phone, and I walked in holding a drawing I'd made of our house. The big oaks tree in the front yard, the blue shutters, everything. I'd spent 2 hours on it. I tapped his arm. He glanced down, said, and looked back at his phone. My brother walked in 30 seconds later and said, "Dad, I made the travel soccer team." My father put the phone down so fast it nearly skidded off the counter. He grabbed my brother by the shoulders, lifted him half off the ground, and said, "That's my boy. That is my boy." I stood there holding my drawing. I folded it in half and threw it away on my way upstairs. That was the beginning. Or maybe it wasn't the beginning. Maybe I just hadn't been paying attention before that. But after that moment, I started noticing everything. The way my father introduced my brothers at his company, barbecues. The way he sat with them at the dinner table, leaning in, asking about their games and their grades and their plans. The way he talked about them to relatives, like they were the whole point of the family. And me. I was just there. An extra chair at the table. A name he remembered to include when signing Christmas cards. My mother wasn't cruel. She wasn't warm either. She followed my father's lead on most things, the way water follows the lowest point in a room. If he didn't make a fuss over me, she didn't make a fuss over me. It was as simple and as devastating as that. I have two brothers. My older brother is 3 years ahead of me, and my younger brother is 2 years behind. Growing up, they were loud and funny, and my father's whole world. I was the middle, the pause, the kid who got good grades that nobody asked about, and won the school science fair 3 years in a row, and had her ribbons stuffed in a box in the hall closet, because there was no wall space. My brother's sports trophies covered every shelf in the living room. I'm not saying my father didn't love me. I've thought about this a lot, and I think he did, in the way that you love something you've never really looked at. The way you love a piece of furniture. It's yours. You'd be upset if it was gone, but you walk past it every day without seeing it. When I was 16, I told him I wanted to study architecture. He said, "That's a hard field to break into." When my older brother said he wanted to go into finance, my father spent 3 weekends driving him to informational interviews and calling in favors from old college connections. I applied to college on my own, filled out every form, wrote every essay, figured out every financial aid document, while sitting on my bedroom floor with my laptop and a stack of printouts from the college website. My father signed what I put in front of him. He didn't ask what schools I was applying to. I got into a good program, a really good one, actually, one of the top architecture schools in the country. I found out on a Tuesday afternoon in March, opened the email in the school library, and sat there alone with my hand over my mouth for about 3 minutes. I texted my mom. She sent back a smiley face and said, "That's great, honey." I called my best friend, and she screamed so loud the librarian came over to shush us. At dinner that night, I said, "I got into my first choice school." My father nodded and said, "Good." Then he asked my older brother if he'd heard back from the internship yet. I stopped expecting things after that. It hurt less once I stopped expecting. College was the first time I understood what it felt like to be seen. My professors pushed me, challenged me, took my work seriously. I graduated with honors, got a job at a firm in the city, worked my way up faster than almost anyone in my cohort, partly because I had been practicing my whole life. I knew how to work hard in a room where no one was watching. By the time I was 29, I had a reputation. By 31, I had savings that would have shocked my father if he'd known about them. He didn't know about them because we didn't talk about those things. We talked at holidays. We exchanged gifts. We had the kind of relationship that looks fine from the outside and feels like a waiting room from the inside. Then my grandfather passed away. He was my father's father, and he'd owned a property management company that had been in the family for decades. Small stuff, mostly. A few commercial buildings in our hometown, some residential units. Nothing spectacular but steady. He left the company to my father, with instructions that it stay in the family. 6 months after the funeral, I found out through my aunt, who had a habit of saying things she probably shouldn't, that my father was considering selling one of the commercial buildings, the anchor property, the one that the whole portfolio was built around. I did some research. I looked at the building's financials, the market, comparable sales. And I realized something. The building was being mismanaged. The rents were below market. The maintenance costs were higher than they needed to be. With the right restructuring, it could be worth significantly more than what my father was planning to sell it for. I also realized something else. I could afford to buy it. Not out of pocket. I'd been building relationships in the industry for years by then. I knew investors. I knew how to put a deal together. And I knew that if I approached this the right way, through a holding company, without my name anywhere visible, I could acquire the building before my father even realized what was happening. I want to be clear about something. I didn't do it to hurt him. That's what I told myself at the time. What I told myself was that I was making a sound investment, protecting a family asset from being undersold, doing what I'd been trained to do. That was mostly true. But if there was a small, quiet part of me that thought about what his face might look like when he found out, I'd be lying if I said that part wasn't there. The acquisition took 4 months. My holding company went through a broker. My father didn't know. The sale closed on a Thursday. I was sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks from my office when my phone buzzed with the confirmation. I ordered a second coffee and sat there for a long time, looking out the window. My family's annual 4th of July gathering happened 6 weeks later. My parents have hosted it every year for as long as I can remember. A cookout at the house, relatives and family friends coming through all afternoon. The kind of event that feels like a production. My father runs it like a performance review. He circulates, tells people what his sons are up to, beams at whoever has the best news to report. I almost didn't go. But my aunt called and said, "You never come to anything anymore," and I felt guilty enough to drive the 2 hours and show up with a fruit salad and a bottle of wine. The afternoon started the way these things always start. My older brother had just made partner at his firm. There was a lot of handshaking and backslapping, and my father standing there with his chest out like he'd personally built the man from scratch. My younger brother had just gotten engaged, which prompted a toast and a round of hugging that went on for a while. I stood by the food table and talked to my aunt about her garden. I caught up with a cousin I hadn't seen 2 years. I ate a hot dog. At some point, my father gathered everyone on the back porch. This happens every year. He gives a little speech. It's his thing. He likes the moment, likes having an audience. He thanked everyone for coming, said a few words about my grandfather, said how proud he was of the family. Then he said, "I'm proud of all of my children." He looked at my older brother. He looked at my younger brother. He did not look at me. "Both of my boys have really shown me something this year," he said, "made me proud to be their father." "Both," he said, "both." I have a memory that flashes up sometimes without warning. Me, 9 years old, folding a drawing in half and throwing it in the trash. It came up right then, standing on that porch, holding a glass of lemonade. I didn't cry. I want to make sure you know that. I had been practicing not crying in front of these people for 25 years, and I wasn't just going to stop now. I set my glass down on the porch railing. I went inside, got my purse, and took out the envelope I had brought with me. Ivory cardstock. My name embossed on the back flap. Not my personal name, but the name of my holding company, which was also the new name. On the deed of the property, my father thought he had sold to a faceless investment group. I walked back to the porch. My father was still talking. Someone was laughing at something he'd said. I waited until there was a pause and then I said, "Dad, I wanted to give you something before I head out." He looked at me like he'd forgotten I was there. I held out the envelope. "Happy 4th, I said. He took it. He didn't open it. He was already starting to turn back to the conversation. I said goodbye to my aunt, thanked my mother for having me, and walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. My hands were steady. I was a little surprised by that. I drove about a mile before I pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat there for 15 minutes, not really doing anything, just breathing. My phone buzzed. It was my older brother. The text said, "Dad just opened your envelope. What is this?" I didn't answer. Another buzz. My younger brother this time. Can you call us? Then my father's number appeared on the screen. I let it ring. I drove home, made dinner, went to bed. He called 4 more times that evening. My brothers called twice each. My mother called once, which was more than I expected. I didn't answer any of them. The next morning, I called my attorney and let her know that contact might be coming through about the property and that everything should be directed to her office. 3 days later, my father came to my apartment. I know this because my building has a camera at the front entrance, and I watched him on my phone from my couch, standing outside buzzing my unit. He stood there for about 8 minutes. Then he left. I'm not proud of that part. Watching your father stand outside your door on a camera feed and choosing not to let him in. That doesn't feel like victory. It feels like what it is. The end of something that was already over. You're just finally letting go of the last thread. He reached me eventually through my attorney, and then through a letter he wrote by hand that my aunt forwarded to me without being asked. I've read it 4 times, and I still don't fully know what to do with it. He said he didn't know. He said he didn't realize. He said the word overlooked, and I had to put the letter down and go make tea before I could finish reading it. He also said he was proud of me. 31 years. That's how long it took him to say it in writing. I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing. I felt a lot of things, some of them ugly, some of them sad, and underneath all of it, something that felt like grief for a version of my childhood that was never going to happen. You can be successful and powerful and know exactly who you are and still mourn the father you needed and didn't get. Those things exist at the same time. I've learned to let them. What I haven't done is call him back yet. I'm not sure I'm ready. I'm also not sure ready is the right frame for it. I think what I'm actually doing is deciding, slowly, on my own timeline, in a way that nobody gets to rush, what kind of relationship I want to have with a man who spent 30 years looking past me and only started looking when I made it impossible to ignore me. That's the thing they don't tell you about getting everything you worked for. The work was real. The achievement was real. But the moment of recognition you spent your whole life waiting for, when it finally comes, it doesn't heal the wound it came from. It just shows you exactly where the wound is. I still design buildings. I'm working on a mixed-use development right now that I'm genuinely excited about, which is a feeling I try not to take for granted. I have people in my life who have seen me clearly for years. Friends, mentors, colleagues, who have shown up in ways my family never thought to. The building is being remodeled. I have good people running it. It will be worth 3 times what I paid for it in 5 years. And somewhere in my parents' house, I assume there is still a box of ribbons in the hall closet. I left them there.